Right.
Okay. Now, I have another interest, as you know, and that is just that everyone has a character style, even if it doesn't reach the threshold for a personality disorder.
And so that would be a trait.
A trait, right.
So if we were to say, look at Judah, because he's our favorite pathological being.
Yes.
Right? And we've had 2 psychiatrists on now, both who have picked him apart.
And have diagnosed me and have, yes.
Right? So if you were looking, if, say, Judah were to come to you, would you be looking for personality traits? Would you be trying to look for a disorder? Or would you be, what's your approach to first looking at somebody and seeing?
I study their character style because I think that informs the clinical attitude that I'm going to adopt with that patient. They're different goals depending on what their character trait or style is. In terms of how you're going to handle them therapeutically, what you're going to try and work on as issues.
So your average person out there, though, right? They don't know that they're like a borderline personality person, or they don't know that or that they might have paranoid traits, or your average person listening on the radio probably has no idea what their basic personality structure is like.
I think it's unlikely. Yeah.
Right. So
why would they?
Right, but so how is this information helpful? How do, like, as we deconstruct sort of personality traits?
Are you asking, is it important to know?
Well, not only is it important to know, but
is it? But
yeah, it's the only way to really know yourself, to know your traits.
Right. Like when you go to therapy, like how important is it sometimes?
You don't go to school and they don't teach you, hey, you know what, you're a paranoid.
Which is the thing about the 12 steps. They're sort of the first thing they're saying is just stop drinking.
Right. And I say, you look at people who come to the rooms, a lot of them, I look at them, and I've had a lot of work within mental health, so I'm sort of diagnosing people. It's just one of my big problems.
Probably a much harder time because of that. Because you're going in there with all your knowledge.
Well,
it's got to make it a little hard.
The question is that for me, I see people, they come in, and I can see often people self-medicating for a mental illness, or I see people that their personality traits are just horrendous, and their behavior is so maladaptive to being part of society that the best thing they can do is be antisocial, drink and use, and they don't care about anybody else. Like they're completely narcissistic, or they're masochistic, and they want to destroy themselves. So,
yeah, well, and they're very hard to manage in a treatment setting.
Right.
Yeah. Now, for example, a narcissistic personality disorder. What's the problem there? Okay. They are overly dependent upon other people to build up their self-esteem. They're very, surprisingly enough, people think, wow, this person thinks they're so great, but they're probably at base, they're really dependent upon other people. They need that entourage. They need that adulation from other people.
Right. This is so ironic. So I always tell people that, I go, the person that wants to be the biggest person in the room probably has low self-esteem.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And
that's usually the case, right?
Right. You see that with comics, right?
Yeah.
They're up on stage.
Always on, like when you're at a diner and you're trying to have a real conversation and they're doing wacky bits. And they want attention,
Well, that's the hardest thing.
Insecure.
When like Robin Williams is on the Tonight Show or Jim Carrey, and it's like there's never a conversation. It's them doing like one of their psychotic bits.
Yeah.
And you're like, just ask them a real question, like answer that question.
Never have. Or a paranoid. What's the problem there? They don't trust people.
Right.
They always think somebody's trying to do something.
Right.
How much of it's hereditary?
We don't really know. Probably some, but most of it is environmental.
But that goes to kind of what Andrew was asking. Does it matter? Does it matter something, even if we figure out one day that something is hereditary, something is genetic, if you have it, does it matter if we know that?
Well, I think it's helpful to know what you can change and what you can't change, and to work with that, at least when you're setting up treatment goals.
Right.
So this is much more complex in some way than just 12-step programs, right?
Oh, yeah.
12-step programs will give you a guideline for living and can help you get sober. But beyond that, there's a whole nother realm of looking at yourself with the help of a counselor or
that's why
a
they
therapist.
encourage that.
Yeah,
right?
and let me give another example. a depressive personality versus a masochistic or self-defeating personality. They both look depressed. They're both miserable. Okay. A depressive, though, it's inside of their head. That keeps putting them down. In a masochistic, it's the whole world that's putting them down. So there's a different attitude that you take. You know, with a depressive, you want to be supportive of them. With a masochist, you don't want to support it. You want to get them to stand up for themselves, and realize that it's not outside of them. It's not everyone else putting them down.
You know, everybody sort of looks at Freud, and at this point, Freud's become sort of a joke in sort of the common world. Freud, everything's about sex, and it was about his mother or whatever. But it seems clear to me that we're coming back sort of to a lot of the thinking of that, this idea of really understanding oneself is much more complicated than we thought, and that really, there's a need for people to be introspective and be able to examine themselves.
It wasn't Freud. I mean, isn't Freud sort of discredited in one degree that at the time when he was treating people, I mean, granted he was treating people from a greater station in life than the common guy on the street, but that he'd have these these young women came in, and they would talk about these experiences with their fathers, that sexual experiences with their fathers, and he decided that they had to have been dreaming, because the polite, well-heeled men of the Viennese society would never do any of these things that they were talking about. So he just diagnosed these women as like, oh, you're having these psychotic breaks, or you're dreaming these dreams, and this never really happened. And that was only because he allowed his own prejudice to be at play here, when he really could have treated these women much more differently.
And she's like, no, the blood in my underwear is real. Dude, for God's sakes. I'm a victim. Someone help me.
Well, this is about countertransference and transference, right?
Sure.
Right. So can you explain to people what that is?
The very important concepts, and that is we all understand the world according to our past experiences. So the patient brings in the transference. In other words, I try to walk in your shoes, but really I am going to perceive the world according to the way I've been raised and the experiences that I've had. Okay? Countertransference is the therapist's reaction to the transference that the patient brings in.
Right.
Is that clear?
So, yeah.
Okay.
So the idea that Tony was talking about is Tony's saying that Freud might have had a countertransference towards these women. And
this is what I read. I mean,
right, and his own beliefs about society wouldn't allow him to accept the straight story that's being told. There must be some other explanation.
Right.
And we are in the studio tonight with Anthony John Dennison, Dr. Coe, and Marty.
And for all the Joy Division fans, I want them to know right now, our wonderful engineer has got us listening to Joy Division.
And the number here is 877-8-830-830. That's 877-8-830-830. You're listening to KLEAN Radio. That's KLEAN with a K.